The principal owner had to pay back $28.3 million and was sentenced to 11 years in prison, and that was also a therapy fraud scheme. And then finally, an Illinois PT in private practice improperly claimed at least $600,000 in Medicare reimbursement for PT services. So again, it's happening in multiple different provider settings for therapy. And that's really a big reason that we can't get out from underneath this radar, is that it just really is rampant. So while we're under this radar, what we need to remember is there are a lot of different people taking a look at us. It's not just one organization that's going, I'm going to decide that I want to take a peek at therapy and see what's going on. So if you can kind of look at this sort of representation of who's looking at us, down at the bottom in the green, we've got the QIO insert. And what their jobs really are to do is make sure that they're going to pull some claims. You might get an ADR asking to see some documentation. They're essentially looking more to make sure that the claim processed the way it was supposed to, that it paid correctly or not correctly. Then in the yellow, we have the MAC. That's your Medicare Administrative Contractor. That is really who's processing your claims there, and we'll talk a little bit more in detail about them. But what's going to happen more so with them is you're going to maybe get an ADR. They may ask for more records if they didn't like what they see. But then as we're kind of going up that pyramid, the kind of inverted pyramid, then we get to the rack in orange. We'll talk about them a little bit more in detail as well. Gets a little bit more hairy with them, with what they're looking at. But then at the top, that's where we need to be really concerned. So this is who I used to work for. So now they're called ZPICs. When I worked for them, they were program safeguard contractors. They're really looking for the fraud, waste, and abuse. And they work very closely with the Department of Justice and the OIG, which is the Office of Inspector General. So that's going to be, if they find something, they're going to work very closely with those OIG agents to bring it in. There can be criminal or civil penalties related to that, and the Department of Justice is going to get involved definitely if you're going to end up in court and potentially have prison time. So with the OIG, there's 3 different areas that we really like to pay attention to when we're looking at what they do, because again, they're quite transparent with us, okay? And they've got several different departments that we want to know what's going on there. So there is that Office of Counsel to the Inspector General. That's going to be the group that really is going to work with a provider if they do have to go under a corporate integrity agreement, if there is going to be monetary penalties, really looking at settlement of cases. This is the office probably within the OIG that you really just never want to have discussions with. Okay, this is not a good thing if you're in discussion with them. But then we also have the Office of Audit Services and Inspections, where really what they're doing is more looking, auditing, and writing reports. And we're going to go into detail about some of the reports that they have written about us in therapy, because again, they don't paint a very positive light about us. Then, like I said, toward the top, we've got the ZPICs. There are 7 different zones that the ZPICs function under. So I've got that sort of listed out there for you. And when you look at what is happening in the ZPICs, you've got sort of this triple aim of, you've got your investigative team, you have your medical review team, which is what I worked on, and then data analytics. And they all are working together to protect that Medicare trust fund, okay? So data may be pulling information on providers, and again, this data is not secret, okay? Anybody know how they get the data to even pull? Anybody have an idea? No? Okay. You give it to them. Okay, this is not secret data that they have. This is your claims data. So every time that you're submitting a claim, you're giving them data about you, and they're looking for trends and aberrant patterns, anything like that, that really tells about how you are billing as a provider and how you compare to your peers. So they'll pull that hard data, then medical review will get involved to say, does that make sense? Does it not make sense? These are the regulations. Oh, that looks a little funny. We don't really like that. Let's ask this provider for some documentation so we can see what's really going on. And then we've got those investigators that are really the overarching group that's working the investigation that medical review and data analytics are helping them out on. Investigators are really the ones that are communicating back and forth with law enforcement as they're working on things. And this is the group that's going to, most likely, if they decide to come into your facility, into your outpatient clinic, wherever it may be, this is the group that may show up unannounced. Okay, they're gonna just walk in the door and say, we're here, we're coming in, this is the group of people that we want to talk to while we're here. This is going to also be a list of claims that we're going to start pulling while we're on site, and then here's the rest that we need to give you to. So I did have the opportunity when I was working there to go on a couple of these on-site audits, really, and they were, I have to say, quite interesting, especially when we went to the ones that were sort of the fake providers. It is very telling as you're starting to get information during those investigations and doing the interviews. So then we have the MAC, and the MAC stands for Medicare Administrative Contractor, and you've got multiple jurisdictions. This is the most recent MAC that was put out in August from Medicare, but essentially Medicare is paying these contractors to do a large amount of work. And I think sometimes that's where the misconception is not everybody understands what all the different contractors are doing under CMS. It's not actually Medicare doing most of the work. They actually contract this work out. So what the MAC is involved with is, again, it's where your region is, and it's for you guys sitting in the room here, that's Novitas. But what they're responsible for is really working with you on your claims processing. They may do some medical review. You may get a letter saying, congratulations, you're one of the providers that's so lucky that we decided to do a probe review and we need some records from you. If they don't like what your records show, they can put you into a targeted medical review, which is never a good thing, and I'm going to explain that. So when they do a probe review, it's usually on claims that you've already been paid for. And they're going to look at it, and they may decide you've got an overpayment or you don't. If you end up in a targeted medical review, it's never a good thing because that's a prepay review. And what I mean by that is you're going to submit your billing. There's going to be an edit in the system that's going to stop it from paying, okay? The edit stops it, and what you're going to get is you're automatically going to get a letter saying we're not going to pay this claim until we see the documentation. So never want to go under a targeted medical review because it really slows down your revenue cycle, okay? And it can, depending on how well you respond to the information they're giving you about your denials, you can stay on these targeted medical reviews for quite a while until you show that you've got a high enough rate of payment, so you've gotten that denial percentage low enough that this really can have an extremely negative effect on a provider. The other thing that you want to pay attention to, and we'll go through this afternoon, is local coverage determinations and medical policy. So the MAC is who is responsible for writing a lot of that information. There is overarching regulatory information that comes out from Medicare themselves, but each MAC has the ability to write some of their own medical policy, and that's local coverage determinations. And I know when I first became a therapist, I didn't even know that these things existed. But it really is very, very important to understand what your MAC is telling you because they lay it out. This is what we're going to pay for and this is what we're not going to pay for, okay? The MACs will provide provider education. Again, they will put payment safeguards in place. For example, if they saw that there are certain codes that are being overbilled, they may put in an edit. We know they have edits in the system on our untimed codes that you really should only be billing one unit of those. So if anything would automatically have more than one unit on it, the claim system's automatically going to deny it. They've got edits in place for that. Again, if a beneficiary would ever have a question, this is who they would go through. This is also the group that's handling if you're a new provider and you're enrolling in Medicare. They're the ones that are processing your provider enrollment. And if you do get some type of denial and you need to start that appeal process, the MAC is the first level of where that appeal process happens. So they're going to be the first ones to look at your very first level of appeal to decide, should it have been paid, should it not have been paid? Are we going to uphold the denial and have you continue to go through that appeal process? Or is it something we can turn over that denial? The recovery audit contractors, there are 4 of them. And again, they sort of split the United States up, and we've really paid a lot of attention to the RACs. Initially when the RACs came about, they weren't paying much attention to post-acute care or outpatient therapy, where their big focus was hospitals, okay? This is where they were really looking for. And it really makes sense when you think about how the recovery audit contractors contract with Medicare. The way that their contracts are set up, they're paid on a contingency. Okay, so if they find overpayments or underpayments, okay, it's typically overpayments they find, but they do find a small percentage of underpayments, they could actually earn a percentage of that dollar of what they find. And so really they had stayed, like I said, stayed away more from therapy and post-acute care. But in fiscal year 2013, there was one of the RACs, so one of the 4 that started to look at skilled nursing facilities, okay? And they ended up recovering about $1.8 million in some of the reviews they did. Now that was only about 6% of the overall recoveries that year, but it really made me sort of stand up and pay attention, because I thought, okay, they started to recover money from SNFs, and it's just one of the RACs. If one of the RACs is doing it, the other RACs are going to see this and look at that and go, oh, $1.8 million, I can get a nice percentage off of that, and probably pay attention and add that information. Well, lo and behold, right around this time that this happened, there was a time period where RAC reviews were put on hold overall, okay? It was a time when they were looking at doing some new awards for the contracts, and whenever Medicare puts, it's called an RFP out, that you sort of have to bid on the work, and they award new contractors, the contractors that don't win have the ability to protest the award. So there was a lot of protesting going on. There was actually a court case going on regarding some of this. And so Medicare actually just kind of put a stop for a while and said, we're just going to stop RAC reviews for a little bit. But right back when they started up again, it was very interesting, because like I said, it was sort of the writing on the wall. The other 3 contractors started to review SNFs as well. Okay, so it really wasn't surprising, right? They went $ signs, $1.8 million, we need to get in on this in our jurisdictions too. So this just has the information on what they're looking for. A lot of it is medical necessity, making sure units match on the MDS assessments, and coding validation. But we did see that happen. And like I said, to me, it wasn't a very big surprise. It was one of those that when you saw the report come out, you thought, ooh, they're gonna be looking at this. The one nice thing about the RACs is that they also have to be extremely transparent in what they're looking for. So they have to let providers know. If you go out to their website, they actually have to list exactly what type of audits they're doing, and that way it really isn't a surprise, or it shouldn't be a surprise to providers. The other reason we really want to pay attention to RACs is because of manual medical review, okay? So initially when manual medical review came about, if everybody remembers this, it was in the last quarter, and if you remember, it was the MACs that were doing it, and we actually had to ask for authorization of services. Does anybody remember that? It was a disaster. I've got heads shaking in the background from some of your leadership that were probably more involved in this process than maybe frontline therapists really understood what was going on. But this was back when you had to send in your documentation and say, please give me 10 more visits. And you were supposed to get a response within 10 business days. Well, it just didn't happen. It just didn't happen. The MACs were not prepared to handle it. And it really was a disaster, and it's been recognized by the GAO and several people that it really was a disaster. So when it came back in then the next year for manual medical review, they took it away from that sort of pre-authorization MAC, and they shifted it to the RACs to do the reviews.